Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 17 of the Make Music Income podcast. My name is Stevie B. I'm joined here by my friend Eric Copeland of Make Music Income. And this episode is brought to you by productionmusicacademy.com as well as makemusicincome.com. And today we're talking about all things related to music production, like basically how to find clients, producing artists versus producing commercial clients. We both have a lot to talk about. This last week has been interesting for me just because I've been doing both. Eric has a ton of experience producing artists throughout his career, as well as producing commercial work as well. Before we dive into it, we are going to just briefly chat about our weeks. Eric, what's been going on with you? I know you've had a busy morning already. You just finished up a live stream, which I caught the end of.
Yeah, I'll start with nothing, because that was the name of the live stream today, starting how to start with nothing.
Right.
And the idea behind this episode came about as I've just been getting different emails lately. I'm in a country and I don't have any way to make music, or I don't have the right stuff, or how do I start if I don't have a good enough, after the videos that we've done about, how to free stuff and all that kind of stuff. We've done repeated videos about how to just work with your DAW like you just did. And I've got a video coming out tomorrow on my composer's channel about a song I made only in Logic and what I could do with that. And so I went full tilt into it. I talked about my entire story. I mean, I talked about how to have stuff, and I talked about my whole story, not as a producer, but as just a musician trying to figure out how to make recordings since I was a teenager. And man, if people think they have it hard now, they should have tried it 40 years ago, when there was no internet, there was no computers that did music, there were no keyboards. Pretty much for you, it was the same. All the instruments behind you were there.
Yeah, pretty much.
And probably very much the same instruments that you play with your hands, the guitars and the basses, were all there. And so you could have sat there and made that music with guitar and bass. You just wouldn't have had a click track unless you had a metronome. And it's come a long way. And so I wanted to start with that to let people know, hey, you're not starting with nothing these days. You're starting with a lot of something.
So true.
And so, but then I said, okay, what would happen? How would I start? And I went through this. I'm not sure if you were there for this part, but I said, how would I start if it was today and you dropped me in a foreign country or even in another state with only shelter, food, and that's it, and some clothes, and nothing else. And I talked about, well, I'd probably go get a job. And first I said I'd probably take a vacation for a few days. But then second, I said I would really get to work and make some money. And, probably go to a public library that has a computer and start up some a Gmail and start up an Instagram, and then go find a cheapo phone plan that has a smartphone that comes with it. And for $20 a month or whatever, once I have a job and I'm able to start paying that $20, and then that phone, if it's an iPhone, then I've got GarageBand. The end. I've got to start. I could take a phone and GarageBand right now and make stock music. That's I think any of us could that are skilled enough with a DAW, because there's beats and there is sounds to use. And if you're careful, it's not much different than the Logic thing that we just did. You could do that with GarageBand. And so I talked a lot about that. I talked about getting a first computer. I talked about getting free software and stuff like that. And eventually I would be where I am now, making the kind of music I am now. And so I kind of try to put it in today's terms as well. So I just did that video, and that is on my channel. You can go find that. It'll take a few days for it to become, by the time this thing is live, this podcast is live, and you're hearing this or watching this, it'll be on the channel. So I also had on the pitch front, I had a taxi brief forward.
Nice.
I talked about the percussion thing that I made last week. I made it all by myself. And I had been making them with the drummer in Nashville, but this time I decided to do kind of marching band meets loops meets real drums and some bass. And I might have played a little too much bass, but it got through, and so we'll see.
Is this on your public on your profile?
It's public on my profile now.
Awesome,
Yeah,
I'll
it's
check
called
it out.
City Funk March is what
Nice.
it's called.
Cool.
And then I had another brief submission yesterday or the day before last that I haven't heard from yet. This one was pretty quick. I mean, I just pitched it last week, and I already got the forward. Sometimes they can be 3 weeks or more.
Yeah,
till
I
you
had
hear
one that
back.
took almost a month. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
even more. Yeah.
So this other one should be pretty quick because it was for a submission for God Save the Queen. They just wanted different versions of that. And I had a version I had done last year. This was not created for this brief, but it was a solo piano kind of laid back version. So we'll see if that's what they're looking for or not. But so a couple of those. Let's see what else is going on as far as libraries. Got a first check from Pond5's subscription library yesterday.
Ooh.
I was just driving along over to a music lesson that I was teaching, and boing, Pond5 sent me $8.04 to my one of my PayPals. And so
Nice.
I immediately pulled over and I posted it to Discord. I said, so it's a thing. And apparently it's been a thing.
Yeah, it's been a thing for way longer than I thought.
Yeah, Frozen Jazz has like 8 or 9 months of records going
I was
back.
surprised to read that too. I did not realize that they've been doing this for that long.
I think one of the months he made $100 from it.
Yeah, right.
Or something like that. And so anyway, apparently this is a thing, and it looks like it's a per download thing. Mm-hmm. So, gosh, if you're getting $8 a download, it's not bad.
Yeah.
I doubt that's somebody else. Mark Mess, he got $16, and he asked them, and they wrote back and said, "Yeah, you had 2 downloads."
That's not
so that's
bad.
$8 a download and a subscription service. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is a little crazy.
Speaking of Pond5, my experiment there continues with Pond5 and AudioJungle and 123RF on putting my music at not the very bottom. They're not $1. They're all at $5, but or 3 credits on 123. But we'll see. It's very interesting so far, and I think it's going to prove. There's going to be a live video in 2 weeks on the 28th. I think that'll be 2 weeks. Anyway, probably 2 weeks. It can be 2 weeks. But anyway, 27th, something like that. But it'll be in a couple Thursdays when I'm at the end of the month. No, it's on the 31st. My bad. And I'll have a live video about this and about my experience with it. And is it worth just doing all of these as penny stocks versus full dollar spot? So is it smarter to do the $50 thing, or is it smarter to do the $5 thing? And what is my experience with these over the past 3 months and then this month? It's a
very difficult question to answer right now. It's very difficult.
Yeah, but when you figure content ID and the more downloads, the better.
That's what I mean.
So
that's what I mean.
What if you make the same or more than you've made from the past month or 2 or 3, and you have more downloads being downloaded and possibly going to YouTube? So
yeah, exactly.
That experiment continues. And then the rest of my time has been doing client work and making a lot of new Easter material. I made 2 new Easter songs this month that are going. One I've already got posted to Motion Array or put up there. Oh, by the way, my contest song from the Logic only song was accepted at Motion Array.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was brought in.
Okay.
And so that's in. So at least they validated me, Steve. And the whole video about that will be in tomorrow. And you're only mentioned a couple times, and it's mostly all good. The Hello Composers video will be out tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it.
So yeah, I did a few more, and I've got like 2 or 3 more to do because I got to get them all up because Motion Array queue is at 11 or days or so right now. It's pretty long. As a matter of fact, I put in a song yesterday and it's 1,500 in the queue. 1,500 something.
Really? Okay. Wow.
I've never seen the queue that big before.
That's crazy.
Emily should have right. Anyway, I've got a few more to do. I want to get in so that when Easter really starts cranking around April 1st, because I think there's a few more weeks till April. I think it's April 14th or something like that, April 12th or something like that. So I want to make sure for those 2 weeks preceding Easter, I have all the Easter songs in there I can get. And that's a lot of what I've been doing. Besides talking a lot, I've been teaching and then talking to some people about some other teaching positions. So I'm excited about that.
There's a lot going on for you. A lot of Easter eggs.
I get it.
I'm the only reason I look forward to Easter every year is because of those Cadbury eggs. Love those things,
dude. The caramel ones.
Oh, dude.
But have you noticed they're smaller?
Oh, they get smaller every year.
They think we're not noticing.
They shave off a couple of grams every year from.
They're noticeably smaller this year. Like, whoa, what?
It sucks. It's just so annoying. That's the world we live in.
So what else have you been up to this year? This week?
This year?
This year and this week?
This week has been good, man. So for this month's monthly challenge on the Production Music Academy, it's speaking of briefs. There's a selection of briefs to choose from, and I think there's 5 altogether. And I decided to choose the 80s synth-wave brief. Mm-hmm. And dude, I'm having so much fun writing in this style. I'm absolutely loving it. I realize now that I have to create an entirely separate alter ego where I just write 80s synthwave music. Maybe I'll start like an artist profile on Spotify for it, and I'm really going to dig into it, and I'll open up those sessions for the Academy members too. But man, it's just, I don't know, it's a style that resonates with me. It just brings me back to gaming in the 90s. The old Amiga computer, the Commodore 64. It's just pure nostalgia for me, and I love it. So I'm having a ton of fun with that. I probably spent a little bit too much time on it this last week, but I have to make up for my submission last month. So this one's going to be a whole lot better.
Good.
So yeah, I'll be featuring everyone's work on a live stream April 6th. So
I got to get to work on mine, my lo-fi masterpiece.
Nice. In other news, I got Lester on the Academy for a track breakdown. He featured his second best-selling track of all time. It sold 4,000 licenses on AudioJungle.
AudioJungle. Wow.
Yeah, and it still sells to this day regularly on AudioJungle. And he was nice enough to send me the stems. And we linked up on a Zoom call, and I just picked his brain for a little bit over an hour about everything from his process, his songwriting process to the VSTs and the plugins that he's using in his sessions. And I am releasing that today for the Academy. So I'm really, really stoked about that. It is a long one, but I think there's just so much gems in there, so many gems in there. And Lester's just so generous with his time and just allowing me to do that. So thanks, Lester, if you're listening. And I think the members are really going to enjoy that.
Everybody really loved his interview. So
yeah, man.
There was a lot from that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, great dude. So yeah, in light of the topic today, the production, I'm finally back to doing a bit of commercial work for my friends at Patagonia. I had to write several pieces of music for them this last week, which took up a fair chunk of my time, actually. So it was a really busy week. They are producing a film about Kernza, which is like a type of wheatgrass that's produced by the Land Institute in the States. A short video about that. I had to produce a couple pieces of music, kind of like quirky acoustic stuff. The total opposite of stock style or like sync music style. So it was really cool to kind of like get into a different zone there. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more in the Academy because it's a different approach in terms of like how I mix it. It's good to kind of like get out of the stock zone, and it was a great excuse to kind of like go in that direction full throttle. So that was fun. And then lastly, I'm trying to finish up my lo-fi album. I got 8 tracks, maybe 9, that I'm going to pitch to ArtList, or I'm going to send it to ArtList. And one of these tracks has vocals on it. One of the members asked me about my thoughts and process on producing vocals in music. And, as you know, and most everyone listening knows, I almost entirely produce instrumental music. Very little of it is vocals, except for, the stuff that I do with my band. And I decided to, hire a singer for one track in particular, which is going to be kind of like the title track of the album. And I produced her, I recorded her vocals and I filmed the whole thing, and I'm going to open that all up to the Academy as well. And it's awesome. I'm still working on it. It hasn't been finished yet. But it's sounding pretty cool, man. And I'm excited to put this album together. So it's going to be 9 tracks total. One of them is going to have vocals on it, and that's been my week so far. I think that's about it. I have a show with the band this Friday.
You've been in the studio a lot with the band too.
That's right. I was just going to say, just finished up 2 tracks in the studio, mixing 2 tracks for our next record, which really doesn't have like a timeline. Like, we're just going to put it out whenever it's ready. But I was in a proper studio last Wednesday or last Thursday. I can't remember, but
if I might interject there, you might document that a little bit and make a little video about being in the studio, a real studio with real bandmates. We do a lot of videos talking about making music by ourselves, and that's as I've talked about with my sync licensing stuff, most of my sync licensing stuff is not myself. It's me and players and singers and all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of people saying, "What, you use other people? How do you pay them? What do you do with them?"
I saw that in the live stream. Yeah, and I always I think that's really interesting. You should talk about that more, and I will talk about that next time we go to record. The last session it was a mixing session, so I'm not sure it would have been that interesting to
or
film
if you
that.
ever get a chance to mix anything for your band, you could show that session off, because again, it's so much. Both of our channels, Daniel's channel, Jesse's channel, it's everybody doing every single instrument themselves versus working with other people. And I think if we're not careful, we'll all just be these cave dwellers making, cave dwellers music. And I think we need to remember that. And this is a session maybe I could share sometime and say, okay, here's a song I just produced for sync, and I used Nashville players, and here's what they look like. And here's the difference between drums from a session and drums from Easy Drummer or whatever thing I'm using.
World of difference there. Yeah,
we have all of those mics separated. We have the guitar parts, 3 electric parts, 2 acoustic parts, and showing how all that melds together. And I think that it might start to get some cave dwellers out of their caves or invite other players in to add parts. And I think when you start adding that other element of other people involved in your stuff, and I've said it before on here on my podcast and on my videos, it just adds a bit of dimensionality that you can't do on your own.
It's so exciting too. It's so exciting to work with other people, especially when you get it right. Like having my friend Missy come in and get her to do vocals on a track was so much fun. It just took me out of that cave dweller zone like instantly, and it just added some new fresh life into the track. And it's all about hiring players.
When I get a part back from a player, it's like Christmas morning.
Yeah, man.
Because I get to throw that into the track and see what they did and how it melds with everything, and if I do that with all players, let's say it's a lot of client things, I will start a piano start with maybe piano loop, and then I'll send it to a drummer and I'll get that back and I'll see how that sits in there, and then I'll send it to a bass player and I'll see how that sits in there. I'll send it to a guitar player and get that back and see it. And it's like it just builds and grows and gets thicker and more dimensional every time with everybody's part in. And I think that's something that we don't talk enough about on here because we're so focused on how to cheaply make music, especially for stock, because you don't want to spend a lot of money. You don't want to spend any money on stock if possible. But when we're getting into the worlds of sync or production of clients or whatever, we're going to get into that. And so let's jump right into production, because
totally.
that leads us right in there. Do you want to start with your history as a music producer and your short history? We'll do short histories of us as like players, but when did production really begin?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint exactly like a specific point, and I'll try to keep this kind of just short. But my background is as a kind of a hired gun as a guitar player. Not only as a hired gun, but someone who's led my own band.
Did you start doing your own stuff at first? Did you just start playing and messing around at home? And
that's right. Yeah, it all started like my interest in working in a DAW all started because I started making demos for my band. That was the whole reason I got Pro Tools in the first place.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be able to kind of like make sketches of songs to send to people. And that was it. That's how it all started. So I got invited to do some session work with a few other acts as a guitar player, and I sort of got like a really interesting glimpse into how that like producing artists kind of works and how it looks and feels. And I thought it was just so interesting. And as my skills grew with the DAW, I realized that there was just so much potential to do that kind of work. And over years and years, it just kind of got to the point where I was making some pretty interesting stuff just on the computer. And that's how it kind of grew for me, man. Like, it just kind of started from like the live, the band perspective of things. And I think really early on, before I was doing it, professionally, someone asked me, like this band asked me to produce their record, and they were like this indie folk band here in Vancouver, and I did it, and I wasn't really prepared for that going in. I mean, you never really are on your first time, but I produced and I mixed the whole record, and it was a hell of a lot of work, and it was very difficult to do. It was really difficult and very stressful, that was that was basically trial by fire right there, and that was the first time I ever really kind of professionally produced something and got paid for it. And then years later, it sort of developed into like film scoring, right? Because I got in touch with a videographer who was just coming up, and she was really stoked on the music I was writing, and she asked me to do some scoring, and that was something at the time that I had no experience doing either. So that was also like trial by fire, and and that kind of paved the way for more opportunities in that vein.
Cool. Mine kind of started just making my own stuff. I would record at home and show people, and as my story goes, I just say I would show people, and by high school, I was showing people my cassettes of stuff. This is back before computer stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just handing out cassettes, showing people what I was doing. And they were like, "Oh, that's awesome. It sounds great. Can you record something for me?"
Yeah.
And it quickly turned to them, as it often does with artists or anyone that you do anything for, or anyone that sees you doing something. Their first thought is polite niceties, and then how can you help me with what you can do? Mm-hmm. And so this was no different. They were like, "Can I come over to your dad's house and record with the mics and record me singing with you playing the piano and blah, blah, blah." And so that's the simple answer. I did one big hit. It was my what I call my first hit. And I recorded this song that I wrote. It started with piano I had a reel-to-reel. And you could bounce from one channel to the other.
Yeah,
and
I always wanted one of those when I was
you would record into one channel, and then when you were recording to the other channel, you could play along with that and record into that and bounce, bounce, bounce.
Yeah.
So I played the piano, then I brought a drummer in, and he played drums, and then I can't really remember if I brought a bass player in. I brought in then I scored out all of the instruments, and this is way before I knew how to score stuff. Because I brought in French horns, and French horns are hard to score in reality for. I mean, they're easy to score on Logic, but to write it out, they're in such a different, all the different keys, all the different instruments play in flutes and French horns, and everybody's playing in different, well, not flutes, but clarinets and flutes, and everybody's playing in different instruments, and trombones and all that kind of stuff you have to write for them. And so I had them all come in 2 by 2, almost like Noah's Ark. 2 players, 2 string players, 2 French horn players, 2 trombone players, 2 trumpet players. And I ended up bouncing this whole thing together and then recorded a vocal on top. It's a mess. If you listen to it now, it's
you still got it? You got to send that to me.
I do have it somewhere. I would have to pull it off cassette. But yeah, and I took that on a band trip. I was in marching band, and we went on a band trip, and everybody just passed it around the bus, and it became my first big hit. Everybody's like, "This is awesome! You did this! You wrote this! Blah blah blah."
That's awesome.
But what that did was start bringing people to me and say, "Hey, I need to record a song for my girlfriend. Can you help me record a song for her?" Mm-hmm. And that just is the short story of working for other people. And no matter what band I was in, I ended up recording us, no matter what, whatever. And then even up into Chicago, when I would work there, I helped a guy when we mixed our band up there. And then when I moved back to Kentucky and met my wife, I pretty much opened up hung a shingle and said, I can produce you or arrange for you or compose for you. And I just handed out business cards at my job and every place else. And so I just started for the 90s, basically, was that 10 years exactly of just handing out business cards and starting to record people in my basement on whatever system I had. Eventually, I had like a little Tascam 644 that did about 4 or 8 channels of recording. And then it would sync to my keyboards, and then I could spit it all out to DAT or whatever I was using for my main mastering down to. And then eventually I started working in local studios with some clients, and I had basically my first album that I did for a couple that was in town that was, and we used local professional musicians and things like that. I played all the keys, but the guy who was the singer played bass, and then we brought in drums and stuff like that. And that was the start of something that's been going on for about 25 years now called Creative Soul Records. It's literally in its 25th year. We started in that record was recorded in 1997. And at that point, I started putting it on my website. I had a website up in like 95 or 6. And people started coming from all over the country to come work with me. I was focusing on a niche now. I was focusing on the kind of gospel Christian niche. And so people went online looking for that. And they went to Alta Vista or whatever the browsers were. It wasn't Google yet. Yeah, and they would search for websites or people who were doing that. So I had people come from Texas, Florida, whatever, to Kentucky to work with me for those first 10 years or so. And then eventually I was going back and forth to Nashville so much trying to pitch demos and things that I decided to finally make the move there. And I met an engineer who said, yeah, dude, you need to come record here with the players and the studios and everything. And so I went there, and the rest is pretty much history. I just started recording with the top session players that were in that genre especially. But I also kind of split off into jazz a lot because a lot of the players were really top jazz players. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got into the contemporary jazz world as well as the contemporary Christian world. They're obviously completely different. I have a joke about it. It's called the J word because jazzers are scared of Jesus and Christians are scared of jazz. So it's kind of funny. But neither one of them wants to talk about the other thing. But both those are very similar small markets, and I became a pretty, not in demand, but a pretty busy producer in both of those.
Christian music is no small market, though.
No, it's not. And jazz and Christian music, gospel music, are about the same size as far as the industry is concerned, about 4 or 5%. And so, which for a niche, it's pretty big, 4 or 5%.
Like, yeah, it's niche, but like, Christian music is huge in the South, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. South and all along the east and south, I would say probably, but because a lot of my clients have come from Pennsylvania, New York, and that eastern side of the U.S. But I've also had clients from California, from every state, and from many countries. I'm currently working with an artist from Africa, and I've worked with Sweden, Manchester, England, all over the place, everywhere, India, every which place. And so that's the history of how my production grew, and it's basically what I've been doing for 25 years now.
And let's talk about like producing for artists first, because we can both talk about producing for commercial clients. I think I'm like, throughout my short career that's been more the stuff that I've been doing, but you've been working with artists for a long time, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about that. I mean, it's like what are some of the things that people should know about producing artists? Like, what are some of the struggles that you encountered early in your career that maybe you learned from, like that kind of stuff?
Well, I was lucky. It has. I'll tell you this. It has slowed down artist work. Of course, COVID has put the clamps on a lot of artist recording,
for sure,
because artists don't have anything to do with it, and also the demise of the CD has also had a lot to do with artists stopping recording, especially expensive recording in Nashville with players and all that jazz, because they don't have a way to sell product anymore, because no one wants to buy CDs. And so it's become a very slim return on stuff. But
it's a slim return on vinyl, because I mean, it's like, vinyl is something that is sort of like we press vinyl for our band, but it's the margins on it are so small, right? Because it's so expensive to produce it.
You can charge more for vinyl. You could easily make them very scarce. What do you charge, $25 or something like that?
Yeah, 25. I think 25 or 30. And it, and the thing is, the upfront costs for producing the vinyl are crazy, right? Because even just like 100 or 200 records is like thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and it takes a while now.
And it takes a while. That's
some
true.
of the vinyl plants have burnt down and stuff. Getting back to your question, though, working with artists, what I noticed from the beginning in the 90s was that, it was going to take a lot of management of personality, a lot of hand holding, putting out fires, both emotional and technical.
Right.
It was going to take a lot of psychological work. I mean, I've told a lot of people being a music producer is only about 50% musical, maybe even less.
This is exactly what I wanted to address here, because it's like you're a people person, you're very personable and friendly, but that is so true, man. It's like, when you're producing artists and we're dealing with people, like, being half the work is like kind of being either like a babysitter or like a therapist, God,
they're always coming in. They're either, and everybody is sick when they record. Everybody. I don't care who you are. You come in, there's some nasal thing. Oh, I'm having allergies today. They're always having allergies. There's always, and they're always not. I just got over a cold.
This is insecurity.
Or I think a cold is coming
manifesting
on.
itself.
Whatever. Whenever anybody, they can sing all day when the speakers are on and they're listening to the track and they're singing. The minute you put them in front of a mic, they're having problems of some kind.
Kidding, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I need some Lay's potato chips or some. I usually drink bourbon when I sing. There's always a thing.
Yeah.
And that's just singers and you're right, insecurities and I think especially the clients I've worked for and likely you've worked for, which are probably not full-time pro session singers. I don't have this problem with full-time pro session singers. In Nashville, when I have a pro session singer come in, they come in and they knock it out and they go home. But I'm talking about people who are stay-at-home moms or dads, or they have a job that they work full-time and they've sometimes never sung in front of a microphone before. Mm-hmm. I've had people that have never sung in front of anyone before. I've had kids, teenagers, every age group, all the way up to 70s or 80. I don't know if I worked with anybody in their 80s, but every age group from 10 and under to every single decade after that. And all of them, probably kids are a little less, mental about it. They're probably just like, bah, 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 and they do their thing. But, anytime you get with someone who's old enough to have emotional problems, they are very sometimes very they're not hard to work with. They just have to be worked with emotionally, psychologically. You have to play certain kind of games with them while they're singing into a microphone.
Right.
There are sometimes you have to give certain people more rests. Some people need to come in and listen and see what they're doing wrong. Some people can go on. But even before vocals, Steve, there's a lot to talk about, because we're talking only about vocalists and when they sing, and we could talk about that all day long. But there is everything from that goes back to way before you go even into the studio. One thing we haven't talked about, and if you want to talk about this separately, let me know, but getting clients. Do you want to talk about that separately?
We should talk about that, yeah.
Well, I mean,
before you do, though, I just wanted just maybe conclude that last little bit by saying that part of your job as a producer, I think, is to break down the inhibitions that people have, and we all have when we're put on the spot to perform. I mean, because that's so much of the job, right? Is just kind of making people feel comfortable, and getting the most out of people. That's really what a producer does. It's you're getting the most out of people's creative, juices, and that. If you're not dealing with like a consummate professional, people are going to feel inhibited when they're put on the spot and put in front of a microphone, whether you're a singer or an instrumentalist. So
I don't mean this in a braggy way, but I literally wrote a book about this. I wrote it when I was in Kentucky before I moved to Nashville, and it was called back then it was called How to Produce an Independent Album or something like that. Mm-hmm. And when I got to Nashville, I rewrote it after I worked in Nashville for a while and knew players and all that kind of stuff, to include working in a major music center. When you go into a Nashville or LA or New York or Austin or someplace that's a music center where there are people who know what they're doing in a big way, not just in a local way like where I was before. And the last I think it was called How to Be an Independent Producer, or I can't remember the name of the final name. I think it's still on Smashwords, by the way. But I have taken it down from almost every place because I need to rewrite it. It's one of those things that has to be rewritten all the time because technology changes and the music business changes, and I just haven't got around to version 3 of it. But in it, I talk about what it feels like as an artist to get those CDs back in the day, or now get your music up on Spotify or whatever. What it talks about to be a person that helps a person do all that stuff, and go from meeting them, from helping them determine which songs are best to record. And then, again, we're still focusing on artists right now. What is their artist brand going to be about? What is their kind of focus? Because as kind of a record label services company, Creative Soul Records has always been focused from going from meeting them to talking about what is they want to do with the music once they finish it. Are you making a CD? Are you making a single just for Spotify? Are you and now are you doing licensing and stuff like that? But what are your focuses as an artist? And then which songs to record? Song discovery is what I call it. And that's basically just going through all the songs that, if they're a songwriter, and most people are these days, going through all their songs and finding out which ones are the strongest and figuring that out. And then getting into those songs and saying, okay, how are we going to record them, and what's your budget, and how can we afford to record them? Are we going to walk into a studio in 2 days and record everything? Are we going to program these out first and then add whatever players we need done? And then what are we going to do and then your vocals, you got to come in and sing. And then we're going to go through the mixing stage, and we got to fight that battle and get it where you want it, where I want it. And then we got to think about marketing. And
you're managing the process. You're managing personalities. It's a big job. It's a lot of work. But it's rewarding, and it's amazing to work with people, especially when it clicks. It can be a nightmare when it doesn't, though. So it's a tough job. But let's let's talk about getting clients. Like what are your thoughts about that? Like in terms of you, when you started doing it, like, I think like what you mentioned earlier with how it all started for you, it's like people came to you because you were kind of like sharing your work with other people. Is that fair to say?
I call it, I'll have what they're having. There's that famous line from When Harry Met Sally. I don't know if you ever saw that clip where she's in a restaurant and she's acting crazy. I won't go into what she's doing, but if anyone's seen this scene in Harry Met Sally, you'll know what she's doing. She's like, yes, yes,
oh,
yes.
Right, yeah. I know what you mean.
And the old lady sitting next to her table goes, I'll have what she's having. And that's basically what people say. I'll meet an artist, or an artist will meet me at a convention, or because when I was really after production, I would go to conventions or like South by Southwest type of things, and I would have a table and I would set up all the CDs I'd produced, and then I would just give out free ones to everybody. And they would hear the quality that I was producing. And they would either say, that's for me or that's not for me. I mean, the quality wasn't going to be the deal, especially once I got to Nashville, because after Nashville, I was having Grammy-winning engineers mix everything and Grammy-winning players play everything. It was almost like too easy to have something great. Now, I couldn't say that about the quality of the artist every single time, because they were what they were. Or the style was going to be or not be what somebody wanted. If they're somebody who wanted metal, I didn't do tons of that, even though I have a metal client right now, as a matter of fact. But which kills. That stuff is awesome. If you like Christian metal, you will love this guy. But as it stands, I would just put out the stuff, and they would take it, and if they liked it, they would get back in touch with me and email me back and says, hey, this stuff sounds awesome. Can you make me sound that awesome? Mm-hmm. And, kind of the earmark of me getting clients was that I could say, especially when I was in Nashville, you can come here and I will help you sound as great as they sound coming out of the top labels in this genre. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing above that. In other words, I don't know if you can go anywhere. It's kind of like whatever genre you're in, there's probably a place that does it best. But Nashville is going to be that for country or for Christian. And that's because that's where all the players are. That's where all the engineers are that have been doing the top country albums, the top gospel albums for 30 years. And they're doing that. So there's not much like, we're going to miss the mark. You never miss the mark, because we know the mark. And sometimes the artist may miss the mark, or they wanted something a little different that they didn't communicate right. But as far as getting clients, to me, it's as easy as showing them the quality of what they can have and them saying, yes, that's what I want. It's no different than going to a car dealership and test driving a car and go, oh yeah, this is what I want to be driving. And then you go into the process of how do I pay for that and make the payments. It's not much different with what I've been doing for people. It's the same thing. They would go to my site and they would either hear stuff they like or they would not. And I think people still do that with us. They do that with us now. Now it's sync licensing library heads that we're trying to get them to go to our site and listen and go, yes, I'll have more of that. I'll have some of that. Thank you. And so it's not much different really. And corporate clients aren't much different, but as far as and that's the same thing with corporate clients. It's a little about going and finding a client and showing them a demo of what you've done for other people, mm-hmm. or them hearing a commercial that you've done or hearing an album that you've done. And you've got a great story about that exact thing, with Google.
Yeah. Well, it's a matter of broadcasting yourself. It's kind of, funny when you were saying like that you had like a booth set up at South by Southwest, for example, that's like, a physical interpretation of what we're all doing now with with YouTube and the internet, right? We're broadcasting ourselves and we're putting our work out there for people to hear. And you can go hard on that. You can send out demos to publishers, to supervisors, to music libraries. I don't do enough of it, but the little that I have done has I've been able to reap a lot of rewards from just putting myself out there just a little bit. And yeah, I mean, that's what we have to do, because as a starting point, I think that's what's really important to understand, is that you have to kind of broadcast yourself and put yourself out there. Once you do get that bit of, work coming in, then it doesn't take a whole lot for the snowball effect, for things to kind of start rolling and start kicking around, because you get one good client and they'll refer you. If you do a really good job, they'll refer you to their friends. All these people, they have other friends that do the same kind of work, and they'll say, hey, this guy did a really good job. You should maybe think about hiring him. That's the same story for you. It's like you probably had, how much of the work that came in for you, producing artists, was from referral, do you figure?
Dude, one time I did an album for this girl who found me at some kind of convention, gospel convention or something. And I did an album for her. And I went to her release concert in this little tiny town in the armpit of America, Paris, Illinois, which is this tiny little town that, the mill shut down a long time ago there.
Yeah.
And it's a tiny little town in middle America. And I went there driving through literally snow and ice, because I had to stop and pick up the CDs in Cincinnati on the way up there for the thing, and I had to get there because I was the one with the CDs, and the show depended on me being there, of her sales. So I got there. She did her concert. After the concert, I met a guy who said, "Hey, I really enjoyed that, and I've been thinking about doing some music." Well, that ended up being a guy named Tom Dolan, who I did at least 4 records with. And he was the very first guy that went with me to Nashville and tracked with all the players and the engineers and stuff in the big tracking. And when I went home and told my wife we are moving to Nashville, and is still a friend to this day. I still do work for him from time to time. And then another girl from that was at that concert heard me, and she got in contact with me. We did an amazing record for her. Around that same time. And then another guy who saw me at that concert, or saw that concert, got in touch with me through email, and I did a bunch of work with him. There might have been somebody else from that town too. So yeah, one concert that I was at, that someone sang their songs that I produced for them, because she was up there singing and dancing with tracks, that led to a lot of stuff. And so in some ways you could say that, some people might hear it at my site. Some people might have gotten a CD from some artist and said, "Oh, this sounds great. Who made this?" And then they'll work their way back to me and find it. And that still happens, actually.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's awesome. And it really it really can snowball quickly, I think, especially if you do all it takes is one good client. And they'll spread the word, and all of a sudden you're gonna have the problem of having to turn things down.
I would say, and it goes in cycles. Like my first cycle was the Kentucky cycle, where I made records with, I found an engineer in Kentucky around 97 when Creative Soul Records started. And I started with that first album that I recorded for that couple, and it turned out really nicely. It wasn't anything close to the Nashville quality, but the songs were decent. The performances were pretty good, and the arrangements were good. And that, plus my own records that I was making, plus records I was making for other people that came after that, suddenly I had a portfolio that I could show people and say, this is my work. And that just got better and better and better and better. And then when I got to Nashville, it took a huge leap higher and got bigger and better and better. And once you have that, it's not hard to find work, because people see the quality, and if you're really after it and you can show them high quality work, you'll have business. And this is no different than running a studio. This is no different than being a stock music producer or a sync licensing producer, or any of the things we talk about. Anytime that you can get as we know, to try to get into a motion array, you have to have 5 songs to show them of quality. To get into ArtList, or to get into a BMG library, or to get into any kind of sync licensing library, to get on forward on Taxi, you have to have quality work that people see. Because I would also bet if you do get forwarded, a song gets forwarded at Taxi, and that library goes to your site to look at more of your stuff, they will need to see if they want to sign you to multiple things, to see a consistency of work. So it's no different really in any of the fields or things that we talk about on this channel. It's just having that portfolio of good high-end work, just like any photographer. My daughter's a wedding photographer, and she has a portfolio that continues to grow. Now she works for Disney. She's literally shooting Disney weddings now in the parks, and her portfolio just continues to grow. And as that grows, your resume just increases. And it's not magic. It's hard work that you spent doing. But I will say this, it does take other people other than you. It takes to get artists, unless you're doing totally electronic type music. You can be a one-man producer for people, I think. But I think there is for most clients, they're going to need some kind of dimensionality to their music, especially if they're doing something that's not lo-fi. If they're doing, even if you're doing pop, you could probably do that. But once you get into rock, once you get into to country and other genres where it depends on players, real people players, you can only program so much, and you're going to need to get some quality people on your side. And they love that. Clients love that dimensionality. They love coming to the studio and seeing it played. Man, I tell you what, talk about referrals. This isn't a referral necessarily, but I've had clients come in to track, and I've seen other clients go into my tracking sessions and come out the other side, and maybe they weren't even tracking that day. They just came to watch because their friend was in the studio, and they end up going and doing an album themselves. Because once you experience that, especially in Nashville with these guys, once you experience that, it's like a no-brainer. You will definitely have what they're having. And so, yeah, that's a big get right like there.
I'll take what she's having. That's great, man. Let's talk about just to kind of pivot over to commercial work, which is a entirely different vibe and a different thing. My experience with commercial work is interesting because I've had, and like I also want to like inject some realism in here because we don't talk a lot about like our fails, You've had like amazing amounts of success with the artists that you work on, and I've had a lot of success with some of the commercial stuff I've done, but it can not work sometimes, and you're gonna have moments where you totally you stumble and you just don't deliver what the client is looking for. With commercial work, I think often dealing with them is a totally different vibe. I mean, when you're with an artist, especially in a studio kind of thing, I mean, it can be a disaster, but it's often I think as long as you sort of have a good rapport with the artist, it could be fairly easy to communicate. But when you're dealing with commercial clients, they have so much on their plate that they're dealing with that it's often or sometimes there's a real lack of direction and vision from them. So you're kind of scrambling and shooting in the dark. And if they don't like it, they're just going to say, we don't like it. Try something else. And I've had some experiences working for commercial clients where it felt really demoralizing because I wasn't able to deliver what they wanted, despite the direction, the little direction that they gave. Mm-hmm. Working, with an ad agency here in Canada was one of my first. It was one of my. I think it was like the second professional gig that I got. I got kind of lucky. It was a referral gig, and they reached out to me and asked me to write some hip hop for like some commercials that they were doing and that they were going to air. And man, it was so tough. It was so tough. Like they just didn't like anything that I sent them. And I was like, I felt so demoralized. And for a long time I was like, maybe I'm not cut out for this kind of stuff, Like it really killed my confidence. And I think for anyone listening that is interested in doing that kind of work, like you're gonna have one of those experiences. It's gonna be really, really rough, and you got to push through and believe that you're only gonna get better, and that sometimes you just can't please the crowd. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Everyone has that moment where you just totally fail. I'm sure you've had those too. And I think, working for commercial clients is just rough in that sense, because it's kind of cold. I feel like they're a little bit cold. Working with the Google folks was really nice. They were really friendly, but they didn't like pull any. They were brutally honest about everything that I sent them. There was no niceties.
Mm-hmm.
There was no this is really great, but it was just like, no, this change, do this, do that. It was they just didn't have time to be, polite or anything like that. I guess maybe like the Canadian in me expects, some kind of like friendliness, inherent friendliness with people, but it's not the case with commercial clients. They can be pretty cut and dry. So
I find it different and the same. In other words, I have worked with so many artists, and again, this isn't to brag, but dude, I mean, literally hundreds of artists over the past 25 years. I mean, maybe it's only one song, and a lot of the artists, some of them I've never met because they're in different countries or different states, and they just never come to Nashville or never come to Orlando or wherever I am, and I just work for them online. I have seen clients like you're talking about in corporate on the artist side, so it's not like they don't exist. There are hard ass clients on the artist side too.
Yes,
they're like they don't like anything, and everything is rough.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know what you're talking about in the corporate side, and in the corporate side, you have the added bonus of them not being musicians at all.
That is very true.
These are, at least the artists you work with are usually musicians.
It's not always a bonus though. It can be a real problem.
It can be a real problem because they think they know what they're talking about and they don't.
And so they have a hard time communicating what they want musically. That's the problem, is that they don't know the musical lingo. Like, it might be something as simple as tempo, but they don't really know how to express that properly.
And artists have that too. Artists can be like that as well.
Yeah.
And corporate people can also be like artists. They can be like, we used to play guitar in a band, man, so I know what this is like, and that I really, and they know all the lingo. But for the most part, I think you're right. I think corporate clients, when I started, when I left corporate work, being a technical, I was a multimedia developer and technical writer and all sorts of other things, but mostly centered around computers and video and stuff and multimedia. I stepped out of that job and directly into the studio full time, working for another producer who had a lot of commercial clients, car dealerships, state of Kentucky, Ashland Oil. I mean, all these different kinds of companies that were in the central Kentucky area or wherever this guy had clients around the United States. And a lot of them were car dealerships, and a lot of them were all sorts of different companies. And we would do scores type of stuff for a company in Michigan. We would do all sorts of stuff. So that was the very first 2 years of my work until 9/11 hit. I bought that company 4 days before 9/11 hit, and the corporate stuff just went. But the bonus was all the artist stuff came rushing in at that time, because like everybody's heart was so big to do something for God or whatever because of 9/11. It changed in this country. 9/11 was like Pearl Harbor Day. It changed the way everybody thought about everything. And one of those things that happened on that was it killed business for a while. Not business itself, but advertising business really kind of changed for a while because nobody was doing happy jingles after 9/11 for a while. And so happy jingles went away, and that was a big part of our business. And then this other company we were working for, they changed their focus because of 9/11 and they went away. So I was working on a jingle the day of 9/11, and that was the last jingle I ever did. And because so much work came in, and I just started down the artist road. But then through the years, I've done different videos for companies, for artists who had companies. I've worked for a lot of artists who have companies that need music done for their company. So the artists who work at another job will contract us to do work for their company. That's not artist work, but it's commercial work. So yeah, I would agree with you that it's a different challenge because those clients are not unlike library owners or whatever that will sometimes they'll just reject things, and you'll just get a rejection. And sometimes you won't even get the gig if you like do stuff for them. I've done stuff for radio shows and different stuff where I've sent a demo in and I've never heard back. Just like you don't hear back from a library or whatever that you pitch to, and you're
That's
like,
right.
or taxi or whatever it is, and you're like, why don't I hear back? Well, that's the reality of not the music business, but business as a music contractor, so to speak. And so, yeah, I've certainly had that happen, and that's just part of it. And while I don't work as much on corporate music anymore, mainly because now we're into different things with licensing and things. My remembrances of it were always a little different. But again, I have had artists that have been similar to corporate clients in the fact that they don't like anything. It's a struggle. It's a fight. It's a total fight, especially non-American clients, clients from other countries who don't know how to communicate either in the language or in a musical terms, and or the work that they've done in their country is done differently. Even with the top pros that I've had a few clients that I was so happy when that project was over because the communication was so hard, and they made everything so hard on all of my contractors, all of my players, all of my engineers, all of my graphics people, all of my mastering engineers, everything. They made it tough on everybody, to the point where I had to apologize to all my contractors and say, I'm sorry. So, and sometimes in corporate that you go through that. You go through that where you have to apologize to everybody. Sorry, everybody, this is a whole different deal. We're not just making fun music here for an artist, or this particular company wants it done this way. Now, when you're in that work, jingle work, and you're kind of singularly focused on that, and artist work is like a secondary thing. Well, then you get a different hat on, and you go to work with your construction hat on, and you just do the work. I don't prefer that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I'm less of a. I think what my takeaway from this chat is just that, like, you really gotta love people. I think if you're doing the artist work, you really got to be amenable to people's personalities. And you really got to be a people person. I think I'm probably less of that than you are, So I think I kind of, in a sense, I think I prefer the commercial work. To be honest, I don't know if I'm totally cut out for producing artists. It's not really something that I feel called or compelled to do any more of. I mean, I'm happy to produce both. Like, what's that?
You and me both.
You've been doing it for so long, so that's a different kind of thing that you're struggling with.
Well, and I do want to say one thing about this is that, I am the difference in corporate people and artists also is that corporate people all are coming in to get something done for their company. They have a kind of a singular vision. Everybody comes in. There'll be different personalities, but it's not like you don't have to stroke them like you do artists to get what you want. And the deal with artists is every single person is completely different than the other person. So it's like you're saying, do you want to have to figure out per person how you have to treat them with kid gloves, or can you run them through the mill, or are they which one, who are you working with today, and how, even with emails, how do I phrase this email for her personality, her light, offendable personality, or for her hard ass personality, or for his like I don't care personality, and every single one of them is a snowflake. They're different in some way. They come from a different background, different age, different whatever. So, and then the other thing I will say about producing, this last thing, is that it can become a bit of a trap, because especially if you are a composer or you are a producer of your own music and you love doing that and it feeds your soul, because producing can be so lucrative. It's almost like a trap of too much success. You can be doing too much of that and not enough of your own thing. And that's one reason why I've slowed down over the past 4 or 5 years with my production, is because my composition has taken more of a front seat in that, as I started focusing on writing for licensing and then started focusing on my composition masters. Suddenly I rekindled what started me down this road in the first place. I got derailed because people wanted what I was having, and now they may still come in and want that, but it's not as much as it was 10 or 15 years ago, because 10 or 15 years ago you could make 1,000 CDs and sell them all and make all your money back. Mm-hmm. Now, making your money back as an artist means you better be out doing gigs and or starting a YouTube channel that makes you a bunch of money, and both of those are hard. And so it can be a trap. Game. It can be a trap as a creative to become a worker bee for everybody in the world, and running a studio or whatever. And then you at some point you realize, hey, I'm not creating for myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something I see in you a little bit, where you are only so willing to work for other people at the sacrifice of your own music. And smart, because at your age, that's when I started to do that. And then It got to a point where I suddenly didn't know myself anymore, and I had written 4 songs in 1 year. Yeah. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not who I am. You know?
That would drive me crazy. I think, it's like, I think I can't, there's always sort of a line. I'm not sure. It moves, but there always has to be a certain amount of creative output.
It's a cautionary tale for you.
Otherwise, like I'll go crazy if I'm not writing anything. If I go a whole week without writing something, sitting down and writing something, I'll lose my mind. Yeah, I'll get pissy. I think there's only so much,
because people are just paying you to do this work.
Yeah, and we all gotta pay the bills. We gotta pay the bills. So. I think it's like from being in a band and leading a band. I think there's just that in and of itself was such, because I have like a 6-person, 7-person sometimes band that I'm dealing with, and they're all very strong personalities.
It's tough,
and they're all like my closest friends, but man, I'm telling you, I mean, like being on the road with these guys. And going on tour and like being in difficult situations where like there's like lack of sleep and there's creative differences and whatnot. Dude, I have like a limited ability to deal with human beings in a sense, because it's like I'm a pretty friendly guy and I'm easy to get along with, but I think I just have only so much patience for like. For babysitting or like working around people's personalities in terms of doing production, just because I know from experience that like working with the band could be extremely difficult. I mean, really really test your patience.
So for anybody watching this, if you're the only person who can tell if you are, because when I started producing, I was like, dang, I'm getting paid to make music all day. That's the dream, right? And for 21 years, that's 22 years now, that's all I've done. I've had some other side jobs during the time, working for a church here, working for a church there, but or some other continuous gig that paid me regularly maybe. But my day job was producing a couple dozen people at a time, and helping them with their brands. But the cautionary tale here is, if you do not think you are a person who can do what you're talking about and juggle personalities all day long, because that's part of what being a busy producer is, whether corporate, but especially with artists. Then running a studio, building a production business may not be for you, or you may only want to do it part-time, a little bit while you concentrate on your music, or a day gig that you work on and only work with some artists here and there and your music other times. And then there are people who don't look at composing as seriously as you and I do, and they're more engineer types, and they're more willing to put up with personalities because they are just technical people. They're not creatives. And being a creative knocking against other creatives, like you're talking about in your band, can be difficult. And so if you're a creative and you're focused on creative and you're dealing with other creatives, and that's multiple of those. I think if you're a technical producer, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're a music technical mixer, producer who is not necessarily holding people's hands all day long, then it might be different, But I think if you're a creative and you have a strong personality, you might find it difficult and or tiring. So
yeah. You got to be zen, I think, to do it properly. You got to be like Rick Rubin. You got to grow a long beard.
You either have to be a complete ass and not care what anybody thinks, which a lot of great producers are that. And the producer that I went to work for was very, very my way or the highway. You can walk anytime you want to every artist. Now he was very nice to them, but he would always when push came to shove, he would say bye. And I am not that way. I am like, I will do anything the client needs and anything the artist needs to make sure they feel good. And if they tell me they're unhappy, it makes me like, oh, I'm like not making them happy. And so I'll go the extra mile to make them happy. And that's almost a personality flaw sometimes when you are so, when it affects your day because a client's not happy that they didn't get the mix they wanted that day, and it really shouldn't. So
you do have to grow some thick skin around that. It's like I said with the commercial stuff too. Like when they get back to you with that cold email that's just like, no, we don't like it. It's like, well, why? What was it about it?
I try to skip past what the personal, like, I don't like this, and just go look at the checklist of things they want and just go do the checklist.
That's it.
And I've learned to start just like not looking at that other stuff, So.
Yeah. It's sometimes you got to just start from scratch again.
Yep.
And that's the name of the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's a good chat, man. There's
good
lots
stuff
of work
there.
out there for producing people or producing for commercial clients. There's plenty of work out there, I'm looking forward to
these
doing more
days.
of it this
if
week.
I was looking for new clients, I would also look at composers like we talk to and like we are, who are out there looking to create stock music, looking to create sync licensing music, and get into that world. And offer them low-cost services to help them maybe master their mixes for them or mix for them.
Right.
Because we have so many people we know, part of your academy, part of my channel, that mixing might be not their cup of tea. And if there were affordable people out there that would do good work for composers like that, that's something I didn't have 20 years ago when I got started. I only had artists or corporate clients. And now there's this other bunch of people out there creating music for sync and creating music for stock and creating music for other things where they might need a technical help. And so there's those clients out there now too. So.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
All right, great. Well, this is a great talk about production, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, I've given this talk about 1,000 times when I tell my story about producing, so it's really easy for me. But because I've given it to every client for 20 years. So, but yeah, man, thanks so much for talking about this. And
yeah, good chat.
Again, everybody needs to look at the Production Music Academy if you're looking for stronger production skills, and watch
join
the
the
channel.
fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else? I guess we'll talk to everybody next week, and we'll have something new and fun to talk about, and lots of new things that will have happened from now till then. So
I'm sure of it. Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Have a good week.